So what they're saying, right? Just be clear for our audience, because I actually read that article. I didn't just look at the headlines. But what they said was
dropping gems like we preaching. Welcome back to the Jury's Out podcast, the show you come to watch attorneys and their friends talk about issues that everyone cares about on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. Right. We are here with Jack and Everett, our partners in crime.
Yo, what's good, people?
And our illustrious guests, Dayna Heckstall and Celia Burgos. Say hi to the audience.
What's up, everybody?
Hi. and this is the Jury's Out podcast, the show you come to watch uncut, raw conversations, cuz. Do it again.
Jury's Out.
There we go. Yeah. I'm not really good at all these buttons. I'm over talker. And we're here to talk about mental health in the youth. There's so many things nowadays affecting mental health. COVID, obviously, that's the real obvious one. I hear horror stories about people going from that seclusion back to the regular world. But then there's also things like social media and peer pressure and bullying.
Racism.
Racism. I forgot about racism. Sorry, I forgot about that one. That's my Puerto Rican privilege. All these hot topics that we want to know as a society and as an audience, what exactly is going on and
with the kids. With the babies.
Oh, for sure.
So why don't you introduce yourself? Introduce yourself, and then talk about what experience you have with therapy with children.
So yes, my name is Dayna Heckstall, but you guys can refer to me as Day. I have my own platform called Miss Well and Woke, is where I discuss the very topics that you guys were just saying about mental health and how it impacts the millennials in this generation as well as the youth. And something I've been doing for a very long time within the field of mental health is treating children and their families. So I made a major career change as a result of it. So everything that you guys want to discuss today about working with kids within, like I said, a hospital sector, within the education system, I've seen a lot in the past couple of years since C-19 jumped off.
Okay. And Celia?
So I am Celia Burgos. I'm a licensed social worker. I currently work in a school setting, but I do have experience with working with mental health, working with children, working with families, providing services to the community.
Mm-hmm. How long have you been doing that?
Overall, over 7 years,
Okay.
8 years in total.
Nice.
So you mentioned C-19. Let's start there. What's a C-19?
C-19 COVID, bro.
Oh!
See, we forget that this kind of jumped off. Like,
that if you say the actual thing on the video, you get affected. So
It's like a curse word.
Yeah, it's like a curse word.
You can say COVID on this podcast. We fine.
no, I'm looking out, right?
Yeah,
So,
you know. Like a block or something, right?
Hey.
You a new law? What happened?
It's an Android, the Dragon Ball Z or some shit.
Okay. With COVID-19, yes.
So, while during the brink of COVID, I was working in emergency rooms, so I was front and center to see a lot of what was impacting the youth. I worked for pediatric psychiatry. Wow. So, like, in gross numbers, we were seeing kids come in, like, in record, just because some of the fear-mongering that was also going on in the media that was telling kids, like, you can't go outside, this is changing the dynamic, you can't go to class. So it was heavily having impacts on kids, even just how they related to their family overall. So you take children where you spend majority of your day outside of the home in a classroom setting, and now you're forced to be around maybe your 8 brothers and sisters in an apartment or in a home and your parents, and the dynamic shifts completely. So we saw an increase, and one of the most devastating things I would honestly say that we saw too is that human trafficking actually increased for youth because they were home and they were on the internet. So a lot of the kids who were sitting there, they were talking to adults or playing video games on the Discord or the Twitch. They were finding themselves in relationships with older people who they had more access to because they weren't in the security or the protection of the school system. Wow. So that was something that we really, really had to combat at that time.
That's a lot of space to fill up. Those hours that typically would have been filled up by a normal
being in a school setting in a safe environment where.
That's the check-in point, right? When kids are in school, they get access to basic needs. right? You have us providing safe environment for them to sit there and educate themselves. And we also have food that's provided to the children outside of the confounds of that system. They're now at home, and we can't protect everything that's going on at home. Some parents are able to sit in the home and work from home, but everybody didn't have the luxury during COVID to stay at home with their kids and to monitor them. So now we're seeing it on the kickback now that school has kind of restarted itself. Kids are coming back, and they were exposed to so many different things that we didn't foresee by being on their own devices. And like I said, social media played a lot into that, because where kids may have some level of awareness, they're now having a higher level of exposure to things that can hurt them.
So you said you worked in an emergency room. So is that like the regular emergency room for like a hospital where kids come in for like a physical injury? And then so I guess my question is like, at what point do you get involved when it's something going on beyond the physical emergency that the kids are going through?
So, there's two types of emergency rooms that people don't talk about, especially within New York City Health and Hospitals, which is where I worked. And you have the psychiatric emergency room, which is one port of entry, and then you have medical, right? And so any of those times, those things can overlap. So you can come in for a medical reason and disclose something that, like, all right, we're going to have to send you on the other side, so you could chop it up a little bit. That's when you would tend to come in front of me, right? So we would have issues like this, for instance, where kids would run away from home. And it could be something as, a staple as, I ran away from home because I felt overwhelmed with the rules that are going on in my house. The only time that I got to be a kid is when I was going to school and I was around my friends, but things at home are getting too intense for me. So you would have kids who would run away. And then upon running away, like I said, you're introduced to other things going on into the community that can have a significant impact. Those kids that would run away were more of a likelihood for a predator to find them. And then, like I said, that's when you would end up sitting in front of me. I ran away from home. I got exposed to something on the street. Now I'm getting picked up by the police and being transported here in this environment. Even things like discipline. We have all different types of rules and restrictions about how people discipline their children, right? It's safe to say it like this. You can open hand, let's say, tap your child on the hand if they do something wrong. But there's certain ways that people communicate with their kids or discipline their children that are not considered status quo, right? If this is happening in your house with nobody looking, a lot of people don't know. When your kids go to school, there's somebody to say, that's not cool, that's not right. When it's happening at home, we don't have the same type of eyes on that situation. So it would rise to another level when this was happening at home for people, where these incidents that would occur one-on-one between a child and their parent would spill over, and you would have a neighbor activate 911 because they overheard something, or somebody in the community. Now you're getting sent to me too, so I can kind of triage the situation and figure out who needs help, not just for the children themselves in the situation, but their families as well. What kind of supports are needed to kind of keep an even rapport.
Now, can a child who's feeling like they're in a situation that's tough or that needs assistance seek your assistance individually or on their own, or is it always through a referral?
Or it has to be through the emergency room?
No, so they actually have really cool things that are created. Like there's an incentive called NYC Well. And so they have a call-in number. It's a mobile crisis center where children could even text in or call in and receive access to services and kind of voice if they're experiencing some type of psychological distress.
Really? What's that called again?
It's called NYC Well. So it's 1-800-NYC Well.
Yeah, damn. I feel like, yeah, ever heard that?
No, never. Hold on.
So people aren't aware, because a lot of people, within the community are very concerned about having psychological assistance or supports. Nobody wants to talk about mental health, right? It's considered taboo. It's considered one of those things where it's like it's uncomfortable. So they want to make it more accessible. So the city came out with an incentive to say, hey, you can always text and or call in some of your concerns, and discreetly we'll send somebody to you within 48 to 72 hours to your home to psychologically assess you on your premises. So people didn't realize that you don't always have to step into the hospital if you feel like it's intimidating. Somebody will come to you and make sure you get the same level of care and treatment.
Right. Now, Celia, did you also get, your, I guess, clients from the hospital, or did they have to find you and go to you?
So I worked in foster care. I was in foster care for almost 2 years. It was a residential. Mm-hmm. So we had the youth with all sorts of mental health issues residing there. A lot of our kids actually went to some of her hospitals or hospitals in the area.
You share kids.
So,
Right.
so our kids came in from the state, from the Board of Education, from ACS, so they came from different areas. So our kids were already living on campus. Going back to what you said before with the sex trafficking, a lot of our kids, because during COVID, they were stuck in that facility. They used to leave campus. They got caught up in the sex trafficking. It was very difficult for the most part, because now we didn't know where our kids went, but we found out through whatever circumstances that they were picked up. They were put to do things that were traumatizing to them. Mind you, these kids were in residential because they already come from traumatizing backgrounds. They have a lot of deep-rooted traumas, abuse, physical, emotional, sexual, different levels of abuse. But yeah, I got my kids because they were placed at the residential. It was a very sad situation for the most part. They definitely went to the hospitals, and they got the services from people like Dayna who were able to assist with them.
Right. And is there like an age, like, is it any age, or is it like a certain level, like only 10 and above? Like, is it?
Actually, my familiarity with working with kids, anyone from the age of 5 and up.
5?
Yes, because, popularly to contrast, there are different mental health disorders that can occur within children that may look different in adulthood, right? So a lot of things that people aren't aware about mental health is that there could be a predisposition to certain health issues. For instance, somebody who's bipolar disorder, as a child, it may show up as a mood disorder on record, but it may not reveal itself until the child is into adulthood, that you'll start to see it that way. Or a child is labeled schizoaffective, where they may have experiences where they're seeing or hearing things, but as an adult, it may be full-blown schizophrenia.
What's schizoaffective?
So schizoaffective is kind of like very similar to schizophrenia. A person is having experience where they may be internally preoccupied, where they may talk to themselves or have experiences where they may see figures or different things that are occurring in front of them that we ourselves may not acknowledge is happening.
I can see that happening, like, kids, like, they play with toys, they talk to themselves, so I can see that happening in, like, 5, 6 year olds. Like, how in the world are you supposed to know that's going on,
So a part of working with children in large form, especially during therapy, is play therapy and seeing how they interact. Within play with children, you can see them have different levels of conversation. You put 2 dolls in front of a kid, they're going to play out their household. They're going to play out their friendships. They're going to show you what's going on. They're going to tell you what the boogeyman looks like in front of them or what the boogeyman looks like behind the scenes. And they're going to engage you in that way. So it's really asking detailed questions to kids. A lot of kids have imaginary friends, and that's a part of them being explorative and having healthy imaginations. So we receive that. But there's another level of it. When their experience is kind of like, when kids talk about, not only am I seeing my imaginary friend, but I'm having full-blown conversations and I'm engaging my imaginary friend in a certain way, right? And if this spans over the course of time and the kid hasn't learned to kind of like sector that relationship, that's when it becomes more of a concern. And that's when we do think about like predisposition, like now what's in the family dynamic. So we do things like genograms where we sit down with families and we talk to them about like what's in mom's side of the family, dad's side of the family. That could eventually be a precursor for this kid to have those experiences ongoing.
We look for the patterns.
Okay. What kind of patterns are like the ones you're looking out for? Or like what's like signs that like what are you looking for? What are like
Mental health, substance abuse, any type of abuse. We look for. Sorry.
Want the people to hear you.
Sorry. So we look for substance abuse, any type of abuse.
Like bruises in the same place that after they heal, like.
So when we're looking at the family dynamic, we're looking for stuff that happened through the generations. Like, let's say your grandfather had issues with drinking. Did your father also have issues with drinking? Now maybe that could lead to you having, or you've seen those patterns. You've seen your,
Susceptible to it.
yes. So that's what we're looking for when we look at the genogram. What patterns in the family hierarchy have you seen? A lot of children share all this information. It's interesting to see how even a child as small as 5 can tell you those things. Yes, I seen daddy. Yeah, mommy drinks. Daddy drinks. Grandpa has drunk. I seen mommy hitting dad. I seen dad hitting mom. I seen grandpa yelling at grandma. Those conversations with those kids are very telling.
right? Because I was gonna ask, like, they don't. Most of these kids, I'm sure, don't come with a documented rap sheet. Of it's you're getting it through the conversations with them, with the play therapy, with the art therapy, where you're getting them to draw or things like that. Talk about what, I've seen things where they say draw your family, and like depending on the size of who they draw, their family members, it's kind of like who is the authority. If they draw someone that's like red or whatever colors, they have like for devil horns or something, it's like, okay, that's how you visualizing these people in your family. Yeah. That's, it may not be as accurate as that, but I'm saying just as an example.
Nah, but like my son drew, like, he's 4, he's about to be 5 in July, but he drew a picture of his family, like me, mom, his little brother, and him, and he was the biggest one.
Nice.
And we was all
about giant.
Yeah, and we was all little ones under him, and but he drew himself like he was like half the page, had a whole body and everything. And we was like some little stick figures in the corner. So he runs my house. Is that what that's what he's saying?
Yes.
He said he see himself as the man of the house.
Okay. All right.
I like it.
All right.
It's very informative in that way to think that you could look at a child's drawing and you can, come to so many conclusions based off of what they're putting in the images. And like you said, just the amount of like size and stature. If they put somebody on the outside of the house, that's a testament to how they feel about that too. If they feel like that's received, or if they're on the outside of the house and the whole family's inside, it tells you how that child sees themselves in comparison to their, their relatives.
That's so interesting.
And also the colors. You have to pay attention to the colors the kids use when they're drawing a picture. Each color could mean something very different. Red is always associated with anger. Right. And you kind of just have a dialogue with the children, like, oh, why did you choose red? Why was red so important? Why did you choose that color? Why did you draw yourself on the outside of the family? You could have a child who draws a picture of the household and the whole family's on one side of the house and they're just standing on the side. Or you can have, I had a kid who drew the mother all the way on the outside of the house, on the other side of the family. And their pictures were so detailed. You get so much information from those kids, especially in their drawings.
So back to the genogram, like, what exactly is it? Like, is it the play dialogue, or is it?
It's a family tree.
It's a family tree, essentially. Okay. It's a family tree that's really like in depth, right? Where we're using shapes and symbols to attribute to certain conditions or concerns. So it doesn't just have to do with mental health, it also has to do with medical as well. So you can use a circle, a square, or a triangle to indicate where within the family these things are more pervasive. So diabetes runs in your family. There's a symbol that you can include in the genogram that show that this many people generations back have diabetes. So that makes it, where I'm working with a 7 or 8 year old child, we're going to have more of a conversation about nutrition, and we're going to talk about health and like what that looks like. How does your family prepare dinner or have meals with one another? And like that, like using that genogram as a precursor to say, this is what it looks like, in broad sense. It's very helpful to the provider, but also to the family as well, because whereas they may not have made these connections, they now have like a whole diagram drawn that we provide to them and that we keep as well to show them that this is what it looks like down the line.
And is a genogram just part of the process of the intake for a new youth client?
Yes. And like people come into therapy for many different reasons. So one of the biggest things that we believe as providers is you meet people where they are. I'm not going to rush you with a genogram. Like the first thing you want to do is may not talk about everybody in your family. Right. You know what I'm saying?
I know you.
Like you got to get to know people. You got to see what people are. It's a creative way to have a conversation with families. And I always said every child at every age is not able to have an in-depth conversation about what's going on with them. So it's a good time to invite other people into the conversation. That's when I can say, like, hey, like, we're going to have mom, dad, grandpa, whoever you feel comfortable with, sit down with us, and we're going to do this together. And even within the creation of this document, I'm seeing how you guys interact with each other just by doing this, or what was known or not known to the family by doing it. So it gives us a lot of good feedback.
They can't. That's a structure that you really can't hide anything. You know what I'm saying? Because it naturally plays out. So it even, you can't talk to a parent about their child, because they're gonna be like, oh no, they do this and they do that because they're trying to cover up their own. But when you set it out like that, you know, the kids be snitches. So like unknowingly be like telling on them. Like,
It's very hard to beat your kid and go, throw up that picture.
Draw me with a smiley face.
And you see that all the time where mama getting at the kid and be like, dang, why my hair so big? Because you always talking about like
Word. Man, that's crazy.
So, do these kids ever get into a situation where they're providing you, get into the situation where they're getting themselves services on their own, or it's always through like a triggering event?
You know, there's kids who come to me all the time, and this is an experience that I have that I always feel like is a very humbling experience. Reality of it is only in mental health, the field of mental health, there's only 7% providers that look like me. Right? So I work in an old boys prep school at this time. I transitioned after the pandemic. When de Blasio was saying that like a lot of kids were in need of service and mental health services, I decided to leave the hospital. I was like, my time there has been served. I want to go into the education system. I want to bridge the gap. A lot of these kids are coming from the schools to me. I want to know what's up. So when I got into the building, I would have little boys approach me and they go, I have never gotten to talk to somebody like you. I've never gotten a chance to sit down and have a conversation with somebody who looks like me. Wow. There's been times where I've been assigned to service providers. There's been times I've been sent to places, but now I have the option of having a conversation with somebody who looks like me, and they're here for it. Mm-hmm. And like I said, it's been, like I said, one of those experiences where I say it's very humbling to say that although there's not many of us within the profession, you see growing in numbers, that we have to be in those spaces and places to give the kids the access and the comfortability to go seek help on their own.
Yes.
Right. So what specifically got you guys into this field, and specifically why kids? You know what I mean? Like a lot of social workers and psychologists and people who offer therapy services, they tend to stay away from kids. I'm not saying I blame them, because I don't want to teach. I want nothing to do with kids, because it's a lot. And I get it, like kids are they got a lot of pressure, they got a lot on their plate too. But, you know, I just, you know, kids, they cross boundaries that some adults don't even cross. I'm trying to put it nicely, but you know. But like, what made y'all say, not only am I going to take on this monumental task of giving therapy, but also to youth?
I mean, in retrospect, some of the issues that we have with adults started because of things that people learned when they were kids. And I guess off the rip, that's where I was coming from with it when I decided to navigate this field. Like, my first working experience, I worked on a research project called Stress and Justice, right? And it was basically about children who experienced their parents getting arrested or some form of violent arrest. And what we were looking to see is if cortisol levels were impacted, because that's the stress hormone. Mm-hmm. And so for kids who witnessed their parents being violently arrested or experiencing some level of assault, those kids had lower self-efficacy. So those kids felt like they were less likely.
I'm sorry.
Self-efficacy.
Yes.
Yes. So basically it was saying that kids who witnessed their parents being in a situation where they were arrested or there was a violent incident that occurred in front of them, they were less likely to feel that they would be able to succeed in the future. So by witnessing that level of trauma, those kids automatically grow up with more stress. And so we studied this over the course of 6 years. I did this from 16 to 21. I worked on this study and going and interviewing parents and interviewing children. And that's what kind of spearheaded my career. I was like, now that I know the data behind it, right? Now that I've done the research to understand how the community is being impacted by these things, how can I provide more of a direct care and service? And I realized that if at 7 or 8 years old, I'm already telling myself that, hey, I'm likely to get arrested because my dad was arrested, or I'm likely to get arrested because my mom had this, legal issue. And now I feel like I can't graduate from high school or I can't go on to college. Like, where can we fix that? So that became a mission of mine to say, I want to get in before this, frame of thought sets in and these kids determine for the rest of their lives, I ain't going to be nothing. I'm not going to do nothing with myself.
What about you, Celia? What got you into this work?
So I wanted to work with geriatric, the old population. I thought that they had so much stuff to offer, they were a wealth of knowledge. Unfortunately, the whole aspect of death and dying freaked me out, and I was like, no.
That shit is heavy, man. Right? Like, he was just talking to them last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
It happens in a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
But similar to what Dayna was saying, a lot of the stuff happens at early stages. So you have to kind of, for me to understand, I like understanding things and why they happen. So for me to feel that personal need for me to understand, I wanted to go back to where it all begins. Then it kind of like, for some, I don't know how, destiny, I was leaded to doing work with families. And little by little, I started working more with families, individuals, and kind of got to where I'm in a school setting now as well. So although I am in a school setting serving the kids, I'm able to work with families as well. So I do speak to parents, I do call them in, I do assist them with the community. So we actually wear many, many hats.
Sheesh, man. I mean, I can only imagine how crazy it can be. Like, do you feel? I mean, of course, it's a skill in and of itself to not take what you experience home, right? Like, because you're human at the end of the day.
It
so
can
the
be
things, and so I'm sure there's also some things that you resonate with, like, damn, I kind of see a little of myself in this child, or things like that, or you know somebody who is like, you know what, like, I know somebody who's the older version of you that didn't get that help. So I'm sure it takes a lot of power to not bring that home and not affect your own,
It sure
peace
does.
of mind. So,
I tell people I call out black sometimes. I'm so serious. I tell people I call out black, and people ask me all the time, they're like, what do you mean by that? I have black fatigue. Okay. I was like, there are experiences that the kids and the families that we are working with that have very real connection to the issues that we see in our everyday lives.
Right.
Like you said, trauma experiences that we may all encounter because we're human beings, right? So there's days where I have to prioritize my own health and well-being. I am a jet skiing, vacation taking, rock climbing, hiking, swimming type of sister. Like, I do things to promote.
Process that pain.
Right, you know what I'm saying?
what you experience.
I gotta put it into other things because, like I said, our brain is very sensitive. So when we take on other people, it's called vicarious trauma. Vicarious trauma comes with the territory of our job. So I always tell people, if you meet a social worker, give them a smile. Maybe throw them a Snickers. Do whatever whatever you feel like you need to do, because 9 times out of 10, by some direct narrative that they've overheard, they've experienced vicarious trauma, and they're still learning how to navigate those spaces. As you get deeper engrossed into the field, you learn how to do it better, of course.
Right. So, I mean, you said something before. It's like, people don't understand that if someone sees their dad get arrested, they're more likely to get arrested. And it seems like for some reason a lot of people don't believe that, right? They're like, nah, you got your own choices. Like, you had your own choice not to get arrested, not to do these things. Like, why do you think it's so hard for people to not believe that, when they see their parents do certain things, that they're going to do it too? You know what I mean? Because, it's America. That's what people say. It's America. It's the freedom of choice. You always have a choice to do something different than what your parents did. But like, if you see something happen with your parents, it's more likely it's going to happen to you. So why do you think that people have a hard time dealing with that?
It's one of those things where it says easier said than done, right? So we try to encourage kids and we try to encourage people and say, you don't have to live the same lifestyle that your family once led. But then there's a lot of things that play into that. Your first interaction in the world is with your family. That's your first stream of knowledge, right? And that almost becomes authority over what's going to happen for you. How you live, where you go, what you eat, how you engage. Your first sense of community is within your household. It's not until after that, when your parents send you off to school or some variation of school, say, where you have other social interactions. And that's when you meet people who are like, well, hey, I live like this. Why do you live like that? Or I got this going on with me, and it's possible for you to get this. You need different types of communities to engage with, an effort to see that things are possible. If you only deal with one type of situation, it limits your viewpoint.
It's like the reason why you should travel. Like,
That's the reason why you should travel.
Expands your
Worldview.
See how,
Got to get out of New York City, baby.
You gotta see other ways to eat chicken. You know what I'm saying?
You know what I'm saying? Right?
There's other shit than chicken. There's a lot more other shit than chicken.
that Bronx worldview is like,
The Bronx worldview ain't a worldview; it's a block view. You know? Block work.
So what y'all study in school?
So for undergrad, I was a psychology major. And like I said, obsessed with studying the mind and the brain, how it functions. And then for graduate school is when I dived into clinical social work.
Okay.
What about you, Celia?
Human resource, because my school did not have social work. So it was human resource, and then in grad school, it was clinical social work.
And what got you into, what pivoted you from that to what you currently do?
It was kind of like, because human resource is essentially, for some reason, I don't know why it was called human resources in my school,
Okay.
but it was social work.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
it was the same thing.
Yeah, some schools be doing that. They be mislabeling their
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I think it's a tax thing or some shit.
So they actually, my undergrad had a partnership where Delphi, I think I'm saying it right, but they did have a partnership with Delphi, which is one of the big social work schools. Unfortunately, I didn't know about that program until I was already graduating. If I would have known, I would have joined in there and would have done like the 3 to 5 program and graduated with my social work degree.
So when you originally went to college, you were studying. You didn't even know, like you were studying what your school was describing as human resources, but you didn't necessarily know what that was going to entail. Yeah. Okay. And
Yeah.
if you were to go back now, you'd have started a program that fit more in line with what you were going to do.
Yes, I feel like the programs that they would have offered would have gave me the more fundamental information that I needed to do social work. But unfortunately, I didn't have that. But they still gave me some sort of level of classes that I needed, but it wasn't social work related.
What school?
Mount St. Mary College. That's up in Newburgh.
Okay, I have no idea where it is.
Exactly.
She said it was like the worst school, and she was like, actually, I don't even want to tell you what school I went to because that shit was garbage.
So, I said I went to one of the greatest HBCUs.
Here we go. There's always one. There's always
Something
one.
that they like to call, Morgan State University.
Yeah, Morgan State, y'all okay, I guess,
Sorry. Let's get back to this historically black colleges. How many of you guys are not liking each other?
After you graduate, baby, it's all love. But when we in there, it's black on black, baby.
What is black love at, man?
We keep it FUBU style,
Yeah, all play football against each other.
Yeah, we were.
These motherfuckers are warm welcome since.
Nah, because we was in the same conference, so
So that they're old school rivals, Morgan versus Hampton University. It goes way back.
Way back.
So, you say that, I remember before you were saying that there's not a lot that these kids are very surprised that they see somebody who represents them, who looks like them. And we've had other guests on the podcast to talk about why they think there's that stigma. What, from your experience, I'm sure you spoke to other social workers and people who are in your field that are your skin color and come from your communities. Why do you feel like there's a very limited amount of y'all?
So I feel like people get typecasted into specific roles, right? So you commonly, when you hear the term social work, the first thing that kids and people in the community see, they hear ACS worker. And they start running, ducking, and stuff like that. I feel like there's times I had to walk through the community with a bulletproof vest on because I didn't know if I was going to get capped. People really, really treated it as if that was my role. And when I navigated a different sector, I switched from psychology to social work. So I always explain to people that I had a distinct need to provide clinical-based services. I wanted to do therapy. So within navigating the field, the first time you enter, people are like, well, hey, you can work with it in this sector, right? You can help kids in this way. You can go in and make sure the conditions of their home is fine. But I was like, the conditions of their home is based off of a mindset, right? So yes, I can go in and take kids out of a home that, sight unseen, or when you look at it, like if the house is dirty or the house is unlivable, or I could teach kids the psychology behind why their house looks the way that it looks.
Right.
And that was a mindset for me. I tell people the reason why I didn't become a psychiatrist or a psychologist per se, and I chose to become a clinician, is because I didn't believe in medication, providing psychotropics to kids in larger rates. Children of color were getting put on all these antipsychotic medications and all these stimulants, and that was a problem for me. And I said, okay, well, I don't want to just go in one aspect and tell people, hey, I can help you get your kid on medication, but again, I can have a conversation with you about medication and what it can be utilized for, and knowing that it's not the only option in terms of treatment. So having people like that say and have that conversation, having people who look like you invest in that conversation and sit down with you makes all of the difference. So I had to kind of like change the mindset and say, when you hear somebody say they're a social worker, there's two streams of thought. I want you to look at me and see a different thing.
Right. Yeah. Hell yeah.
Cecilia, the Latin culture. I mean, there's a stigma where in our families we don't talk. If you got a problem or if you got a family member that's got the psychological issues, we don't talk about that. So what do you feel about
We
that?
don't talk about Bruno.
That is fact. So
So-
you touch on your experience, your understanding of that.
That was a very difficult portion of my work with the families. They really don't understand what mental health is. They would just say it was more of the kid was behaving bad. The kid doesn't understand. It was very interesting to service a lot of families where they just was like, the kid is a problem. They didn't realize that it was like a whole family dynamic issue. The kids were just reacting to what they saw, and to explain to a parent that the reason why they were behaving this way was because of what they were exposed to.
Right.
It was very difficult. A lot of families do not understand that they weren't open to mental health. They don't understand what mental health is. And even now to this day, they still don't understand what mental health is. I still have this conversation with my own family about mental health, and they was like, oh no, they just are mal comportado, which is they're behaving badly. That's not the case. Is more in depth to that.
And I feel like especially being children of immigrants, right? They came from a place where they didn't have the metaphorical elbow room to have the time to think about what they're feeling and interpreting that and breaking that down. And so they come here with all the sacrifice that they do make, and we always appreciate them for that. And they use that as a justification to be like, yo, like I withstood this, and now I made a better life for you, and you need to withstand it too because I did it. And the way they measure the potential in like, oh, I came here and created a better life for you, but not realizing like, yo, because you didn't deal with your shit, you're now causing my shit. And you're creating my shit, and now you're not giving me an environment where I can deal with my shit. And by me wanting to deal with my shit, you see it as weakness, right? And then I can't also call you on that shit because you're just gonna bring up the sacrifice you made to get me into this room where now I can have the time to sit and think to myself, what is bothering me? Why is this doing that?
And it's also the fact that they don't realize that they left their country. They're in a whole different country. There's rules and expectations of how you should raise your kids here. A lot of families feel that corporal punishment is acceptable. They don't know the right ways to discipline their children. A lot of kids come to school and say, well, this is how my mother hit me, and it may or may not be okay. A lot of parents believe that their kids should behave how they were behaving back home. These are different kids. These are a different generation of kids that are being raised in this country. You cannot come here with the same mindset that you had in your country. Those kids, depending on where they're from, I know kids from the Dominican Republic, they have a lot of land to roam freely. The kids here are very limited in what they can do. There's not a lot of access to parks. There's not a lot of access to a lot of outside activities for these kids now. I know for us, in our generations, we could go outside.
Yeah.
But a lot of these kids
We have
can't.
TikTok.
Oh my God, they love TikTok.
But like for black folks, like it was very similar. It's like, there was a certain mindset, right? This is a different generation now. You needed a certain mindset to make it back then. When my grandfather was, he had to leave school and he had to work because the family needed money. He didn't have a high school education. So you needed a certain mindset to get your shit together so that you can at least make some money. And Jim Crow, you know what I mean? Where the laws was not built for us to succeed. So you needed that strict mindset and that consistency. And they did that to, one, protect us, and two, make a better life for us. So now that we're here in a better life. It's not what it should be, but it's a better than what they went through. They're trying to impose those same standards on us. And it's like, no, you used that, right? I'm not blaming you for, beating our ass every night, right? But now I'm smart and old enough to know why you did that, because you had to do it to protect us and make a better life for us and make us strict. You got us there now, so pump the brakes, baby. It's a new generation. You don't have to use that same corporal strictness, harshness that you had back then for now.
It's a safety precaution. We can understand why communities of color utilize that to create order around it. My children are not safe going certain places if they don't learn certain types of rules for society. Yes. There's a social normative that's created that tells people like, hey, you can't do this after a certain time. You can't go here. Right. You don't have access to that. So it was like a grooming to almost say, an effort for us to survive, we have to assimilate in certain ways, and we have to live out life like this. So if my form of discipline is keeping you in order, then I'm preventing you from getting into a situation that can hurt you down the road. Yes. One of the most commonly things across the Black and brown community that people say is like lazy. When we come across children who are not moving quickly or not reading quickly or not working hard enough, they call them lazy. Right. And there's two words that I tell people I don't use in reference to children is lazy and bad. Those are like lifelong statements that stick with kids. But this is something that we're first. If you don't do what mommy asks you to do, you don't do what dad asks you to do, you're being bad. You deserve to be disciplined. Right. You don't get up. You're not reading as quick. You're not doing what I'm asking you to do. You're being lazy. And that creates like a conditioning for kids where they feel like that's who I am. I'm a lazy bad child, right? Because my mom and dad worked hard, grandma and grandpa worked hard. I'm just lazy and bad.
And you accept it as a defense mechanism because you kind of, it's like this mountain that I can never get to the peak of. Like, you know what? I just get tired halfway up trying to compete because I'm always lazy. I'm always bad. So you know what? I'm just going to accept it and be in this lazy
They
badness.
give up.
Are parents open to these conversations?
Oh, some of them you gotta kind of like drag, kicking, and screaming. I'm not gonna say. I talk to parents very different ways. I have this voice where I'm like, okay, Miss Johnson, Miss Rivera, I'm gonna talk to you like this, and I was like, all right, look, Miss Johnson, Miss Gonzalez, we gonna have to talk a little bit, and you gotta kick it to them in different ways so that you drive the concept home, right? I was like, I always use the example of Little Timmy. I always have an imaginary kid, Little Timmy, that I use. Where I'm explaining things to families. And let's say little Timmy, he's 13, but he reading on the first grade level. I don't think little Timmy lazy, right? I don't think he's lazy. I think that he needs more supports academically. And I'll explain to them what it looks like and the types of conditions that also like come in to foster why a kid would be struggling like this. Could your son be dyslexic? Could your son have a speech or communications disorder? There's so many different variants to what can be impacting your child. So what you may see is, he don't want to do homework, he's acting out in class, but it could be something as simple as bolstering his literacy. So, I have to kick it to parents very different in effort for them to feel where I'm coming from.
But it's not just parents most of the time, it's also teachers. Teachers don't understand what's really going on in the classroom, especially after coming from a pandemic. It's a lot of kids who don't know how to read, who are just coming to the country. I work with, in the district that I work with, we have a lot of immigrating families. And a lot of these kids do not know how to read, do not know how to properly write, and they're afraid. So it could be seen as they're misbehaving. They don't want to follow the class structure, but they can read. They cannot read nor write.
That's what got me. I couldn't read or write, but I enjoyed math.
And math was that was a tricky one. I like money though.
ELA was it for me. Once I started learning about adverbs and I was like, nah, fuck this, man.
They got me to 4th grade, and they were like, "You can't read?
How'd you get here? No child left behind."
I was crushing it until reading started becoming more mandatory.
Right. You went to Catholic school, you paid to get left back.
I did pay it. My grandma, I failed the 4th grade because of those tests you take.
Yeah.
I couldn't read all. It was like the first.
They sent his ass to public school.
We're keeping money, but you gotta go.
All those big 4th grade. What's crazy? There's crazy little personal stories. All those big 4th grade tests that you're supposed to pass, like statewide tests.
Yeah, the Sims or some shit like that.
So I went.
Remember the
They
color
call them
book?
regions for 4th grade.
No, not a
No,
Regis. Nah,
citywide
it's a
examination.
citywide
Yeah.
examination.
Okay, that's my trauma speaking.
So,
Okay.
Yeah,
so my entire education is built on quicksand. Like that. They even had to send me back to the 4th grade because I went to the 4th grade, failed all those tests, went to captain school. They were like, "Oh, let's see what's wrong." Ooh, you don't read that one. we gonna
You need Jesus.
We gonna send you back to the 3rd grade. So now I'm a 5th grader in the 3rd grade, and these 3rd graders are kind of stupid, and they didn't teach me how to read. So I smoked this 3rd grade. Smoking it. Oh, when I turned 11 in January, they were like, "You're 11."
You gotta get out the 3rd grade.
And then I did so well, they skipped me to the 5th grade. So I never took those tests.
So you went back and then jump forward again.
Yeah, and I was still
2
behind.
steps back, 2 steps forward.
No. Something like that.
One step back,
2 step forward.
2 step forward.
3
3 steps behind.
You know, it's so crazy when you say that because when you talk to families, they don't realize their rights in that situation. Your kids don't have to take standardized tests. There are plenty of families that opt out of the test taking process. There's
Tell us
certain,
more.
you know, and I get that all of the time.
You definitely can. Yeah.
You definitely can't. So those things that become test taking anxiety for kids that create problems for them down the road where they feel like I can't try for this position or this opportunity because I'm not a good test taker. That's something that was fostered when they were little kids. Because if that one exam that happened back in the day, you felt like it was a setup, you're a little nervous when it comes time to opportunities where exams present themselves that you need to pass. So a lot of people, what they decide to do is their kids don't take an examination until maybe they do see the SAT. There's certain things that you can't avoid, right? Or the ACT, for example, forces a different type of academic understanding. You can opt out all the way through. So like I said, a part of what we do also within the field of social work is I'm not just giving you, information as it pertains to mental health or working with you in therapy. I'm teaching you different concepts too. So I tell people how to navigate society.
That's some dope information, but I'm gonna tell you, I don't see many black families telling their kids, you ain't gotta take that test. I don't see it. I just don't. I'm gonna be real.
This is unfair.
I'm gonna keep that in the chain of test.
Well,
I don't know.
That's a good segue. Fuck those tests. Wow, man. These kids are going through a lot. I feel like we could be talking about these kids all day, but we gotta wrap this up. We definitely need to have a part 2 to this because I feel like figuring out.
We got a lot more to touch on.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
But before we go, we got sponsor. No, I'm bugging. Doing it.
Artist of the week.
Artist of the week.
Yeah. So artist of the week is Kipton Hinsdale. He is an abstract multimedia artist who is also a incredible charcoal drawer for a famous artist named Robert Longo. Works there, and I've seen some of the work that he does, and it's like you think it's a photograph where he uses his charcoal, but he's mostly known for his abstract multimedia graffiti-ish influence work. He actually just today, one of his works was in a photo in the New York Times. Yes, the New York Times. Which was on the front page of the art section. So it was like a picture of this apartment, and one of his paintings was right there. So big up to him, Kipton Hinsdale. You could definitely commission him for work at KiptonHinsdale.com. And you read more about him in our newsletter this week at attorneyswithswag.com. So thank you very much.
Sponsor goes out to Bailey & Bailey LLC. They're attorney at law. They do a lot of private work, including civil litigation, real estate transactions, landlord-tenant, wills, trusts, and estate work, and basic consultation. So whatever your needs are, whatever you may need in terms of the civil realm, not criminal, but civil, hit them up.
Get that check.
Bring that money. All right. But thank y'all. Thank you for the sponsor.
Yep. Thank you so much for the sponsors. We really appreciate you guys. Without you guys, we would have to be
Yeah.
doing this.
I have to pay this shit for myself, and it'd be one mic, and we all be It'd be Zoom.
Before we go, is any you want to direct the audience to any websites or any social issues or whatever?
Social media.
Yeah.
Why, yes, I would.
Yeah.
So you can find me at Miss Well and Woke. That is on Instagram. It can tap into any other streaming platforms that I am on as well, and websites. I do consultations. I provide therapeutic services. and most importantly, information, because information is key. So if you want well content, woke content, that's where I'm at.
You take insurance or?
So yes, I'm in the process of getting certified to take insurance, but for right now, we are doing sliding scale fees and out of pocket. But soon come.
Stay tuned.
And Celia?
So I'm in the process of working some things out. I am in the path of getting my LC. So when that comes into play, I'll definitely be putting myself out there to provide services for individuals, families, to make sure that they are connected to the community and make sure I provide them with as much level of services that I can provide.
And while we've heard these terms in the past before, what just for the audience who might be his first time listening, what's the LC?
Licensed clinical social worker.
LCS.
LCS.
Social media or?
So I do not have anything set up yet. So I'm
all
waiting
good.
to establish myself, and then everything will be up.
Nice.
We got you when you were sponsored.
All right, guys. Well, we really appreciate you guys listening, and check us out next week. We out. We out.
No. What they're saying, right? Just be clear for our audience, because I actually read that article. I didn't look at the headline. But what they said was
Dropping gems like we preaching. Don't overstep the line of my freedom of speaking. We cast to the world, put the words in the street and connecting all the minds of the people we reaching.
Yo, tempted to get fenced in and contempting. Teach you motherfuckers a lesson and pressing the issue at hand. Nah, I don't care about objections, suspensions, and cell inspections. Just suppression of black lives is my passion. And love for my fam is everlasting. So stop gassing these asses with glasses. Cause in the end, I leave them where the trash is.
out. Jury's out. Jury's out.
There's no doubt what we about, and we kick it to the masses. Trying to spit the law as we laugh off our asses. Breaking down the latest shit, carrying crazy lady shit. Glad I got no baby shit. COVID got me crazy, bitch. Damn. And G gon' have to edit this. The jury's out, so you can't even credit us. No statements null and void, invalid evidence. No, you can't take us to court, cause you know.
Jury's out.